Hi, it's a pleasure to have you here. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video. I spent 2 years putting aside every extra dollar, skipping little luxuries, and dreaming of a moment when I could gather my entire family for a trip we would remember forever. I imagined my grandchildren running on the sand, my son smiling without the weight of work, and Emily, my daughter-in-law, finally seeing me as more than an old woman meddling in their lives. Each night before bed, I would look at brochures of the beaches we'd visit, picturing us laughing together as a family, just like in the early days before tension began to poison everything. I thought of the dinners we'd share, the sunsets we'd watch, and how the salty breeze might blow away all the misunderstandings that had grown between us. My heart swelled with pride at the idea of offering them something beautiful after all the struggles we had endured. This trip became my reason to keep going, to face each day of loneliness with the hope that love could heal. I believed so fiercely that if I could just create this perfect moment, we'd remember why we needed each other. I convinced myself that no bitterness was stronger than the memories we could build on that beach. Every weekend, I'd research hotels, make calls, and compare flights, determined to find the best deals without compromising comfort. I pictured myself walking through the airport holding my grandchildren's hands, feeling like a true matriarch giving them the world. I even bought matching luggage tags with our family name, convinced it would make Emily smile and remind her we were one unit. I dreamed of sitting next to her on the plane, laughing at the flight attendants' jokes, finally breaking the icy walls that had separated us for so long. I would close my eyes and see myself by the pool, hearing my family's laughter floating in the air like music. My dreams were so vivid they felt real, giving me strength to endure the days when Emily barely looked me in the eye. Each time I transferred money into my savings account, I felt closer to the joy I longed for, certain I could fix everything with this one generous act. I believed love was enough to make all our hearts soft again, and I prayed every night that I was right. Deep inside, I knew my relationship with Emily had never been easy, but I held on to a secret hope that this vacation would be the turning point. I thought of moments in the past when we shared small laughs or cooked together, and I told myself those memories meant something. I imagined us walking side by side along the shoreline, letting the sound of the waves wash away the resentment she seemed to carry every time I tried to talk. I rehearsed in my mind the words I would say to her under the stars, words of apology for anything I'd done unknowingly to hurt her, words of love for the mother of my grandchildren. I fantasized about the look of surprise and relief on her face as she realized I only wanted peace between us. I thought this trip would give us quiet moments away from stress, a chance to start fresh without anyone interfering or reminding us of past mistakes. I wanted so badly to become friends with her, to share stories and dreams like two women who cared for the same family. At night, I would lie awake imagining the joy on my son's face when he saw his wife and mother finally getting along, giving him the harmony I knew he craved but never dared to ask for. I pictured the smiles of my grandchildren as they watched us laughing together, feeling safe in a family that truly loved one another. I dreamed of coming home from the trip with a new bond, one strong enough to endure future hardships. Every detail I planned was infused with this silent wish, as I chose activities I thought Emily would enjoy and picked restaurants that served her favorite dishes. I wanted her to see my effort and understand how deeply I cared about making her happy. Even when she avoided eye contact or responded coldly, I reminded myself that this vacation was my chance to show her how much I longed for peace. I believed with all my heart that love and patience could mend the cracks between us if only we shared these days together. I approached the planning of this trip like someone preparing the most important event of their life, checking and double-checking every reservation to make sure nothing would go wrong. I called airlines late at night to confirm flight times, spoke to hotel managers to request rooms with ocean views, and spent hours reading reviews to guarantee we'd be comfortable and safe. I made lists of activities, balancing adventures for the children with quiet moments for the adults, determined that everyone would find something to love. Each spreadsheet I created felt like a step toward bringing us together, and each email I sent to tour guides made me more confident I was building the perfect experience. I even arranged for a surprise family dinner on the last night of our stay, imagining the sparkle in everyone's eyes as we toasted to a new beginning. Nothing was too small for my attention because I wanted every second to feel special. Planning became a joyful obsession, a mission to prove my love through details. I found myself smiling at strangers as I shopped for travel accessories, thinking how excited the kids would be to get new goggles or how Emily might appreciate a soft beach towel with her initials embroidered. I personalized itineraries and printed them out with colorful covers, hoping they'd sense the care I put into making this trip unforgettable. My heart fluttered with every booking confirmation email, convinced the universe was helping me build the perfect stage for our reconciliation. I even coordinated outfits for a family photo shoot on the beach, imagining a portrait we'd hang on the wall as proof that we had conquered our differences. In my mind, every act of planning was a silent declaration of love and a prayer for harmony. I truly believed that by taking care of every detail, I could protect us from arguments and remind them all how much we needed each other. My hope burned so brightly I could almost feel it warming the empty corners of my heart. As the departure date approached, I noticed Emily's coldness hardening like ice with every passing day. Whenever I brought up the itinerary or mentioned how excited I was to see the kids playing in the sand, she would barely nod or offer a forced smile that disappeared as quickly as it appeared. Sometimes, I'd catch her rolling her eyes when she thought I wasn't looking, or whispering to my son with a tone that sounded like annoyance dripping from every word. It felt like each plan I shared made her retreat further, and every attempt I made to involve her in decisions was met with thinly veiled disdain. I told myself she was just stressed about the trip, but deep down I sensed something more sinister brewing in her mind. My hopes for a happy family getaway began to feel fragile, but I clung to them desperately, believing love could still melt the frost she carried. Late at night, I replayed our conversations in my head, searching for moments where I might have unknowingly hurt her or crossed a line, but I found nothing that justified her increasing hostility. Each morning, I tried again, offering warm greetings and gentle questions about what she'd like to do on the trip, only to receive curt, clipped answers that shut me out completely. My son seemed oblivious to the tension, smiling at his phone or changing the subject whenever Emily's tone grew sharp. Watching them together, I felt like an outsider in my own family, wondering how the woman I had once welcomed so warmly into my home could look at me with such disdain. The warmth I once believed time would build between us now seemed impossible. The harder I tried to reach her, the colder she became, like a door slamming shut with every attempt I made to open it. Just 2 days before we were supposed to leave, as I sat organizing the travel documents on the kitchen table, my phone buzzed with a message that stopped my heart cold. It read simply, "Emily doesn't want you to come," a sentence so blunt it felt like a knife plunged straight into my chest. My hands trembled as I read it over and over, hoping I had misunderstood or that it was some cruel joke, but the words never changed. In that moment, the bright world I had built in my mind shattered into 1,000 pieces, each sharp with betrayal and humiliation. I felt a wave of nausea as I realized all my months of love and effort had been reduced to a single, cold dismissal. It was like everything I feared about Emily's growing contempt had crystallized into those 7 words. I sank into my chair, staring at the family photos on the wall, wondering how we had reached such a cruel place. I remembered every birthday I had hosted, every gift I had chosen with care, and every attempt to make her feel part of the family, all erased in an instant. The house felt silent and hollow around me, as if the message had sucked the air from every room. Tears welled in my eyes, but I wiped them away, determined not to let anyone see the depth of my pain. I wanted to scream or call my son immediately, but something inside me whispered to wait. I knew this was a turning point, and that whatever came next would define whether my sacrifices would mean anything at all. I spent the rest of that day wandering around my house, every familiar object now a painful reminder of the family I had tried so hard to hold together. I pressed my hand against the framed pictures of my grandchildren, wondering if they would ever understand how much I loved them, or if they would grow up believing whatever Emily chose to tell them about me. The betrayal hung heavy in the air, wrapping around me like a suffocating blanket I couldn't shake off. Even the soft ticking of the kitchen clock felt like a cruel countdown to the moment my family would leave me behind, enjoying the vacation I had dreamed of giving them. My mind replayed the message like a broken record, each repetition deepening the ache in my chest until I could barely breathe. I wanted to cry out for help, but there was no one left to hear me. That evening, I cooked dinner in silence, listening to the sounds of my son and Emily laughing together upstairs, their joy a sharp contrast to the emptiness consuming me. I placed plates on the table out of habit, but no one came down to join me, and the food grew cold under the harsh kitchen light. I sat there alone, the quiet punctuated only by the occasional clink of my fork against the plate as I forced myself to eat. My tears fell silently, each drop a testament to the pain I refused to show anyone else. I told myself I had to be strong, but inside, I felt like a shattered mirror reflecting only my own heartbreak. At that moment, I vowed not to let them see me break, knowing the battle for my dignity had only just begun. The morning after I received the message, I gathered every ounce of courage and asked my son directly what was happening. I expected at least a flicker of concern or an attempt to comfort me, but he simply shrugged, eyes glued to his phone as if my heartbreak were nothing more than a passing inconvenience. His indifference stung worse than the message itself, each dismissive word confirming that my feelings meant nothing to him anymore. He told me I should do whatever Emily wanted because it was her vacation too, his tone flat and detached, like my presence was merely an option easily discarded. I searched his face for the boy I had raised, the one who used to run into my arms after school, but he was nowhere to be found. Instead, a cold stranger stood before me, more loyal to his wife's whims than to the mother who sacrificed everything for him. I tried reminding him of all the time, love, and money I had poured into making this trip happen, hoping he would remember the countless nights I stayed up planning every detail so they could have a perfect vacation. He sighed heavily as if my words were an unbearable burden, telling me I was being dramatic and should stop making everything about myself. His words sliced through me like glass, each syllable more painful than the last, leaving me stunned and speechless. As he walked away without looking back, I felt something inside me crack, a deep realization settling in that I was truly alone. There would be no ally, no comforting hug, and no defense against the storm Emily had brought into my life. All I could do was watch him disappear down the hall, the distance between us growing with every step he took. That night, sleep became impossible as waves of grief crashed over me the moment I closed my eyes. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, every memory of my son as a little boy flashing before me like a cruel movie of what we once were. The silence of the house was deafening, amplifying the emptiness that had settled into every room since our bond began to unravel. Each time I thought I had cried all the tears I could, fresh ones spilled down my cheeks, soaking my pillow and leaving my face raw from wiping them away. I tried to pray for strength, whispering desperate words into the darkness, but even God felt far away in those endless hours of heartbreak. I replayed every moment that had led to this point, questioning what I could have done differently, but no answer came to soothe my torment. As the clock ticked past midnight, I curled into myself like a child, wishing someone would knock on my door to offer comfort, but the house remained cold and empty. I thought of the smiling faces I had imagined on the trip, each one now twisted by betrayal and rejection in my mind's eye. My chest ached with every breath, the physical pain of heartbreak making it hard to inhale without sobbing. I realized in those lonely hours that my sacrifices had never been seen as love but as obligations to be tolerated until they were no longer useful. The sharp sting of this truth cut deeper than any insult Emily could have thrown at me. I promised myself I would not forget this feeling, for it would become the foundation of the strength I knew I would need in the days ahead. The next morning, unable to shake the dread weighing on my heart, I decided to check the reservations I had made with such care. My hands shook as I logged into the airline website, praying I was imagining things, but my worst fears were confirmed when I saw my name had been removed from the flights entirely. I stared at the screen in disbelief, scrolling through every detail I knew by heart, each missing line a silent confirmation that I had been cut out of my own plans. My heart pounded so hard it echoed in my ears, and I felt a bitter taste rise in my mouth as the reality of their scheme settled in. It was not an accident or a misunderstanding. They had deliberately erased me from the vacation I spent years dreaming of. The betrayal was now laid out in black and white, undeniable and cruel. I moved on to the hotel reservations, hoping for a mistake, but found the same nightmare. My room was cancelled, and Emily's name had replaced mine as the primary guest. The finality of it all made my knees buckle, and I clutched the edge of the kitchen counter to keep from falling. My mind spun with disbelief and anger as I realized they had planned to leave me behind all along while enjoying the trip I sacrificed so much to create. The tears came again, hot and angry, but this time they were mixed with something new, a spark of resolve. I would not allow them to treat me like a fool without consequences. I knew in that moment that I had to find a way to reclaim my dignity and show them I was not the helpless woman they believed I was. Determined not to let doubt linger, I picked up the phone and called the airline, praying there was some mistake or technical glitch that could explain my erased reservations. The agent on the line checked the details carefully, and I held my breath, hoping against hope for a miracle. Instead, she confirmed the worst: my bookings had been changed and my seat was now assigned to someone else. Her polite tone only deepened the humiliation as I thanked her for the information, my voice trembling with barely contained heartbreak. Hanging up the phone, I felt the final piece of my hope crumble, leaving only the sharp shards of betrayal behind. The walls of my home seemed to close in around me, each familiar object now mocking the love I had so foolishly invested. I sank into the nearest chair, numbness spreading through my limbs as the truth settled in like a heavy fog. There was no misunderstanding, no chance that my son or Emily would appear with an apology and an explanation that would make this nightmare end. They had intentionally cut me out, carefully erasing every trace of my presence from the vacation I had sacrificed so much to give them. My hands gripped the armrests so tightly my knuckles whitened, the anger bubbling beneath the surface stronger than the tears I no longer had the strength to shed. I realized this was no longer just about a trip, it was about respect, about my worth as a mother and grandmother. And at that moment, I vowed I would not let them steal my dignity without a fight. Later that evening, as I walked past the closed door of my son and Emily's room, I heard Emily's voice rise in a cruel, mocking laugh that sent chills down my spine. Pressing my ear closer without thinking, I caught snippets of her words, each one dripping with contempt as she bragged about how she would finally get a vacation free from her annoying mother-in-law. She spoke with such glee about how easy it had been to convince my son that I didn't belong, painting me as a burden who would only ruin their fun. My heart clenched at every word, the casual cruelty confirming everything I had tried so hard to deny. I felt my blood run cold as she described how I would probably cry when I found out, laughing at my imagined tears with a viciousness that stunned me. I stepped back from the door, my legs unsteady as waves of nausea threatened to overtake me. Hearing Emily's words ripped away any illusion that this was a misunderstanding or an overreaction on my part. The woman I had welcomed into my home and tried so desperately to love despised me with a hatred so deep it made my chest ache. I could almost see her smug smile through the wood of the door, each word a dagger confirming that she had been planning my exclusion for weeks, maybe months. My son's silence during her tirade was just as damning, his complicity ringing louder than any spoken word. Alone in the hallway, I realized the battle lines had been drawn, and I was the only one who hadn't known we were at war until now. The shock of Emily's words quickly gave way to a burning determination deep in my chest, a fire I hadn't felt in years. I wiped my tears and stood taller, knowing I could no longer beg for scraps of kindness from people who took pleasure in my pain. Instead of letting them walk all over me, I decided I would turn their betrayal into an opportunity to reclaim my power and remind them who they were dealing with. I knew I couldn't confront them directly, they would just twist my words and paint me as hysterical, feeding the narrative they had built. So I chose silence, letting them believe I was clueless while I planned every step of my response with precision and care. My heart still ached, but the pain now fueled a resolve sharper than any blade. I spent the night sitting at the kitchen table, lit only by a small lamp, thinking through every possibility until a plan took shape in my mind. I remembered every detail of the reservations, every payment I had made, and every piece of leverage I still held. By morning, my sorrow had hardened into a quiet, icy focus. If they thought they could humiliate me without consequence, they were about to learn otherwise. I promised myself I wouldn't scream or beg, but instead show them the power of a woman who had sacrificed everything and would not be discarded. They had underestimated me for too long, seeing only a doting mother-in-law instead of the woman who built this family with her own hands. And soon, they would learn the price of their cruelty. I decided that silence would be my greatest weapon, a cloak of invisibility that would let me move undetected while they smugly prepared for a vacation they thought was secured. Each morning, I greeted Emily and my son with calm politeness, hiding the storm raging inside me behind a composed smile that betrayed nothing. I nodded along when they discussed packing or travel plans, forcing myself to respond with measured words so they would never suspect the plans I was setting into motion. My heart pounded every time I looked at Emily's face, remembering her laughter at my expense, but I held my tongue and channeled the pain into quiet determination. In those days of pretending, I learned the power of patience, savoring the knowledge that every casual lie they spoke only fueled the justice I would deliver. I realized that by keeping my intentions secret, I held all the power, and the thought gave me a new strength I hadn't felt in years. Each evening, when they retreated upstairs, I sat alone in the living room, running through every scenario and contingency in my mind until I knew exactly what needed to be done. I understood that the element of surprise was my greatest ally, and I refused to surrender it by giving even a hint of my anger. As I folded laundry or washed dishes, I imagined the moment they would realize everything had unraveled, picturing their stunned faces with a sense of grim satisfaction. My silence became a shield, protecting me from further hurt while giving me the time to prepare every detail of my plan with surgical precision. I knew they saw my quietness as weakness, and that misconception was my secret advantage. In the stillness of those nights, I transformed from a helpless victim into a strategist ready to reclaim control of my own story. When the house finally grew quiet one night, I retrieved my laptop from the closet where I had hidden it behind old blankets, determined to secure the resources I needed to turn the tables. Logging into my bank account, I felt my pulse quicken as I checked every recent transaction, confirming once again that I had paid for every flight, hotel, and planned excursion with my own hard-earned money. I knew that if I moved quickly, I could make sure they didn't just exclude me from the trip but would also lose the luxury they so shamelessly plotted to enjoy. Without hesitation, I began transferring every cent from my checking and savings accounts into a separate account only I could access, the weight of years of sacrifice and betrayal guiding my every keystroke. I left just enough in the original account so that their upcoming automatic payments would fail, knowing the shock would hit them like a thunderclap. As I watched the confirmation screens appear one after another, a sense of power flooded through me, replacing the fear and despair that had ruled me for so long. I whispered to myself that I deserved better than being discarded by those I loved, and that it was time they learned what happens when a woman like me is pushed too far. The glow of the laptop screen reflected on my face as I double-checked every transfer, ensuring nothing could reverse the moves I had made. I logged out and cleared my browsing history, erasing any trace of my actions so they would never see the betrayal coming. Closing the laptop, I felt lighter than I had in years, as if each dollar I reclaimed also returned a piece of my stolen dignity. For the first time in what felt like forever, I slept peacefully, knowing I was no longer powerless. The next morning, with fresh resolve coursing through my veins, I gathered every confirmation number and reservation code I had carefully saved in my notebook over months of planning. I called the airline first, my voice steady and polite as I identified myself as the original purchaser and requested the immediate cancellation of every ticket associated with my name. The agent complied without question, and I felt a surge of triumph as she confirmed the flights had been voided, their dream vacation already starting to crumble. Hanging up the phone, I moved on to the hotel, repeating the same calm process until the reservation was wiped clean, ensuring that not even a single night remained booked for the people who had plotted against me. Each call was a small victory, each cancellation a step closer to reclaiming my power and showing them the consequences of their betrayal. I moved on to the car rental, the excursions, and every dinner reservation I had carefully secured, canceling them one by one until there was nothing left of the trip they thought was guaranteed. The weight of each click and confirmation lifted a burden I had carried for far too long, transforming my heartbreak into decisive action that brought me back to life. When the final email arrived confirming every reservation was cancelled, I leaned back in my chair, breathing deeply for the first time in days. I imagined Emily's face when she realized the perfect vacation she had stolen was gone, picturing her rage and confusion with a satisfaction that warmed my soul. I knew there would be consequences, but I was ready to face them, because I had already lost everything that mattered, and I refused to lose myself. The morning of their planned departure arrived bright and clear, the sun casting golden light on a day that should have been filled with joy and excitement. I watched them bustle around the house with smug energy, Emily barking orders as my son carried luggage out to the car, both of them convinced they were hours away from paradise. They barely acknowledged me as they checked their phones for flight updates, each glance filled with satisfaction that I would soon be left behind. My heart pounded with a mix of dread and anticipation, knowing the confrontation I had carefully prepared for was about to unfold. As they pulled out of the driveway, I stood quietly at the window, my face calm but my thoughts racing with what was to come. The silence of the empty house felt different this time, not lonely, but brimming with a sense of power I had never felt before. I imagined the scene that would greet them at the airport, every cancelled reservation waiting like a ticking time bomb ready to explode in their faces. I took a deep breath, reminding myself that I had done what I needed to protect my dignity and show them the cost of their deceit. The minutes passed slowly, each second a step closer to the moment when my absence would become more than just an inconvenience. It would be the spark that revealed the depth of their betrayal to everyone around them. I sipped my coffee in silence, picturing the chaos ahead with a calm resolve, knowing there was no turning back now. They thought they were leaving me behind, but in reality, I had set the stage for their downfall. Today was not just the day of their departure, it was the day I reclaimed my worth. At the airport, as they arrived full of excitement, Emily's confident stride faltered the moment they reached the check-in counter. I later learned from a friend who happened to be traveling that day that the airline staff's polite smiles quickly turned to confusion as they scanned their passports and found no valid tickets under their names. Emily's voice rose in frantic disbelief as she demanded to know what was happening, her face growing redder with every explanation the staff calmly repeated. My son stood beside her helplessly, fumbling with his phone as if he could will their flights back into existence through sheer desperation. Other travelers began to glance over, curiosity piqued by the growing commotion that shattered the illusion of their perfect family. Each second of confusion twisted the knife deeper, proving that they had underestimated me entirely. I imagined Emily's eyes darting wildly as she realized that not only were the tickets gone, but there was no backup plan, no graceful way to escape the embarrassment now playing out in public. I could almost hear her shrill voice echoing through the terminal, accusing the airline of incompetence even as the truth closed in around her like a trap. My son, who once looked at me with the unconditional love of a little boy, now stood powerless, his shoulders slumped under the weight of the reality he had chosen to create. The chaos they faced was the first taste of the consequences I had set in motion, each moment unraveling their carefully constructed fantasy. I felt no joy in their suffering, only a grim satisfaction that justice had finally arrived, wearing the face of every cancelled plan they had stolen from me. Back at home, my phone began buzzing incessantly, the screen lighting up with call after call from my son's number as their panic reached a fever pitch. I let it ring, the sound filling the quiet house like a soundtrack to the downfall of their selfish schemes. I pictured them standing near the check-in desks, eyes wide with horror as they fully grasped that I was the only one who could have cancelled everything, and that I had done it without a single word of warning. Each unanswered call was a silent message of my newfound strength, proof that I would no longer beg for their love or tolerate their cruelty. I imagined Emily screaming at my son, demanding answers he didn't have, their relationship beginning to crack under the weight of their shared betrayal. The idea of them turning on each other brought me a bittersweet sense of vindication, knowing the unity they built on my pain was finally shattering. I walked through my quiet house, phone still buzzing in my hand, each ring making me stronger as I reminded myself I was not the villain in this story, they were. I refused to answer, refusing to give them the chance to twist the truth or make me doubt the choices I had made to protect myself. I stood by the window, watching the empty street, and felt an unfamiliar peace settle over me as the calls finally stopped, leaving only silence in their wake. For the first time in years, I felt the weight of their expectations lift from my shoulders, replaced by the powerful certainty that I deserved better than the scraps of love they offered. I knew the storm wasn't over, but in that quiet moment, I realized I was ready for whatever came next, because I had finally learned the power of choosing myself. As the reality of their ruined plans sank in, Emily's composure crumbled spectacularly right there in the crowded airport terminal. Her voice rose to a piercing shriek, echoing off the high ceilings as she hurled insults at my son, calling him useless and pathetic in front of strangers who quickly gathered to watch the unfolding drama. Her carefully curated image of the perfect wife dissolved in seconds, replaced by a furious, unhinged woman unable to contain her rage. Passers-by stared wide-eyed, some pulling out their phones to record the scene, while airport staff tried awkwardly to calm her down without becoming targets of her wrath. My son's face turned pale as he realized the woman he defended so blindly was exposing their cruelty for all to see, his helpless silence only deepening his humiliation. Each second of her meltdown was a crack in the facade they had maintained, revealing the rot that had festered beneath their polite smiles. Meanwhile, Emily's words grew more vicious with every breath, accusing my son of sabotaging the trip and blaming him for the entire disaster as though she had played no part in it. She stomped her feet, tears streaming down her face, her voice breaking as she demanded answers he could not give. The commotion attracted even more attention, with travelers stopping mid-step to gawk at the spectacle of a family imploding before their eyes. I could almost see it all unfold, imagining the rage in her eyes, the desperation in his voice, and the growing realization that there was no one left to manipulate into fixing their mess. The embarrassment they felt was a mirror of the pain they had tried to inflict on me, only now magnified by the judgmental stares of strangers. And as I sat safely at home, I knew this was the justice they had earned with every cruel word and every lie they had told. Among the chaos at the airport, my innocent grandchildren stood clutching their small backpacks, eyes wide and faces pale as they watched their parents unravel. The tears started slowly, their confused sobs growing louder as they realized the vacation they had been promised was slipping through their tiny fingers. My heart ached imagining their little faces stained with tears, their dreams of beaches and ice cream melting into fear and disappointment. They looked from Emily's fury to their father's helplessness, unable to understand why the people they trusted were shouting and blaming each other instead of comforting them. The pain I felt for them was deeper than anything I had experienced, because they were the true victims of the bitterness and betrayal that had poisoned our family. I wanted nothing more than to reach through the distance and scoop them into my arms, whispering that none of this was their fault. But I also knew the sad truth: they had already been turned against me, fed subtle lies and cold silences that painted me as someone unworthy of their love. My heart broke knowing they might never know how hard I fought for them or how deeply I cared about their happiness and safety. I pictured them standing in the middle of the terminal, sobbing as strangers watched, their small bodies shaking with confusion and fear, and I prayed that one day they would see the truth. I hoped that someday they would remember the grandmother who tried to give them a beautiful memory, not the villain Emily wanted them to believe I was. Until then, I resolved to protect myself so that when they came looking for answers, I would still be here, strong enough to tell them the real story of what happened. The scene escalated as more onlookers gathered, phones raised to record every second of the scandal unfolding in the middle of the bustling airport. Security personnel arrived, trying to separate Emily's wild gestures from my son's attempts to calm her down, their presence only adding to the chaos. Travelers whispered to each other, some openly pointing and shaking their heads at the meltdown, while others giggled at the shocking drama happening right before their eyes. The perfect family image Emily had worked so hard to project shattered completely, replaced by the viral-worthy spectacle of two adults losing control in a public space. My son's voice cracked as he pleaded with Emily to lower her voice, his eyes darting around in horror at the realization that they had become a sideshow for hundreds of strangers. Each second stretched painfully, the tension thickening the air until it seemed like the entire airport was holding its breath. Back at home, I watched updates trickle in from acquaintances who were at the airport, their texts describing the scene with a mix of disbelief and pity. I imagined the embarrassment radiating from every pore of my son's skin as the cameras captured his wife's rage, each video a permanent record of the consequences of their deceit. I knew that this very public unraveling was something they would never be able to bury or spin to their advantage, and the thought gave me a grim sense of closure. The same walls of polite society that once protected their lies were now echoing with the truth of their actions, broadcast for anyone to see. It was the climax of the drama they had written, acted out on the stage they had chosen, with the world as their audience. And in that moment, I felt the full weight of my decision lift from my shoulders, replaced by the quiet certainty that I had finally set myself free. As the airport meltdown reached its peak, my phone rang with one final desperate call from my son's number, the screen lighting up like a beacon of his panic. I held the phone in my hand for a long moment, my finger hovering over the answer button as old instincts begged me to pick up and rescue him from the chaos. But then I remembered the years of silent disappointment, the countless moments of feeling invisible and unimportant, and I realized that this call wasn't about love or regret, it was about control. He wanted me to fix the mess he and Emily had made, to bail them out one last time with my love and forgiveness. Taking a deep breath, I let the call ring until it went to voicemail, then turned off my phone, the silence that followed feeling like a protective cocoon. It was the hardest decision I had ever made, but I knew it was the only way to break free from the cycle of manipulation. The quiet house grew even stiller as I placed the phone face down on the table, cutting off the final thread they thought they could pull to drag me back into their chaos. My heart pounded as I resisted the urge to cry, focusing instead on the relief of knowing I was no longer at their beck and call. I reminded myself that love should never come at the cost of self-respect, and that by ignoring that last call, I had chosen my own peace for the first time in years. I stood by the window, watching the sun set with a strange mix of sorrow and liberation coursing through my veins. The day had begun with the threat of abandonment, but it ended with the power of choice firmly in my hands. I finally felt like the author of my own life, not a footnote in someone else's selfish narrative. After the storm of emotions and the silence that followed, I packed a small suitcase with the few things I truly loved, my favorite summer dress, a good book, and a photo of my grandchildren from happier times. Instead of staying in the house where every corner reminded me of betrayal, I drove to the airport alone, my heart steady with the decision I had made. I walked through the terminal with my head held high, savoring the freedom that came with knowing I was choosing this journey on my own terms. I booked a last-minute ticket to a quiet coastal town I had always dreamed of visiting, a place where I could hear the ocean waves without anyone's cruel laughter echoing in my mind. Boarding the plane, I felt the last remnants of fear slip away, replaced by a cautious excitement I hadn't felt in years. The world outside the airplane window looked brighter than it had in a long time, as if the universe was rewarding my courage. Arriving at the resort, I was greeted by warm, salty breezes and the gentle roar of waves crashing on the shore, the sound more soothing than any apology I knew I would never receive. I checked into a cozy room overlooking the ocean, the bed soft and welcoming after nights of restless sleep in a house full of ghosts. I spent the first evening walking barefoot along the sand, letting the cool water wash over my feet as the sun set in vibrant streaks of orange and pink. I promised myself I would fill each day with quiet joys, whether it was reading by the pool or watching the stars from my balcony. For the first time, I was on a trip where my happiness was the only priority, and every moment felt like a balm on old wounds. This was the beginning of a new chapter one was determined to write with strength and hope. The morning after I arrived at the resort, I turned on my phone for the first time in days, curiosity getting the better of me despite my resolve to move forward. The screen exploded with notifications, each one more furious than the last as Emily unleashed a torrent of angry texts that ranged from desperate pleas to vile insults. She called me selfish, insane, and heartless, painting herself as the victim in a story she had twisted beyond recognition. Each message pulsed with rage, demanding explanations I had no intention of giving, threats mixed with accusations designed to break me down and make me regret my choices. Reading her words, I felt a flicker of the old pain return, but it quickly dissolved under the calm certainty that I owed her nothing, not an answer, not a justification, and certainly not my peace. She was powerless now, flailing in a storm of her own making. I scrolled through her endless paragraphs, each one more hysterical than the last, until I reached the final message that simply read, "You'll regret this." The words made me laugh quietly, not out of cruelty, but from the realization that I was no longer afraid of her anger. I pressed the block button with a steady hand, watching her name vanish from my screen like a dark cloud finally swept away by a strong wind. The silence that followed was blissful, a space where I could breathe without anticipating the next attack. I set my phone down on the nightstand and stepped out onto the balcony, the ocean sparkling under the morning sun. In that moment, I knew I had reclaimed not just my freedom, but also my right to live without fear of someone else's wrath poisoning my days. Days into my peaceful escape, I learned through an old friend that someone had posted a video of Emily's airport meltdown online, and it had quickly gone viral. The footage showed her screaming, gesturing wildly, and berating my son while travelers watched in shock and amusement. The video spread like wildfire across social media, with thousands of strangers weighing in on the dramatic scene, most of them criticizing Emily's behavior and questioning what kind of family drama could spark such chaos. Knowing the truth behind every tear and accusation in that video, I felt both vindicated and sad, aware that our private pain had become public entertainment. I watched the clip only once, my heart a mixture of disbelief and grim acceptance as I saw the consequences of their betrayal play out before the world. Friends and acquaintances I hadn't heard from in years began reaching out, some offering support and others simply gossiping about the spectacle. While I never wanted to expose my family like this, I couldn't deny a sense of justice in seeing them face the fallout of their own cruelty. The video had done what I never could, it revealed the truth of their character without me ever having to speak a word. As the video continued to circulate, my inbox filled with messages from people expressing sympathy and admiration for how I had handled everything. Childhood friends, distant relatives, and even old coworkers reached out, many confessing they had witnessed Emily's disdain for me over the years but never felt it was their place to intervene. Their kind words wrapped around me like a protective blanket, reminding me I wasn't crazy or cruel for standing up for myself. Each message reaffirmed that I had made the right decision, and for the first time in ages, I felt seen and understood by people who mattered. I spent hours reading through their notes of encouragement, tears streaming down my face not from sorrow but from relief and gratitude. Some shared stories of their own painful experiences with toxic family members, offering solidarity and wisdom that made me feel less alone. Their support transformed the loneliness of my quiet hotel room into a space filled with warmth and connection. By the time I finished replying with heartfelt thanks, I felt stronger than ever, ready to continue building the life I deserved. In the days that followed, the silence from my son grew louder than any scream, each hour without a message or call speaking volumes about his own guilt and humiliation. Word spread that he had missed out on a major promotion at work, his professional reputation tarnished by the viral video of his family's public meltdown. Former colleagues who had seen the footage whispered behind his back, questioning his judgment and stability, and I imagined the weight of his choices pressing down on him like never before. He no longer had Emily's confident voice to shield him, only the echoes of their own betrayal reverberating in his empty silence. I felt a deep ache for the boy he once was, the child who ran to me with scraped knees and bright eyes, but I knew I couldn't save the man he had become. His refusal to reach out told me he was too ashamed to face me or too stubborn to admit his mistakes, and perhaps both were true. I accepted that we might never speak again, but I also knew it was better than returning to a relationship built on lies and disrespect. In that silence, I found my own peace, knowing I had chosen myself even when it meant losing him. Each morning at the resort, I rose early to watch the sunrise paint the ocean with hues of gold and pink, feeling a quiet power swell in my chest. The peace of those dawn hours reminded me that I had survived heartbreak, humiliation, and betrayal, yet still stood strong. I no longer felt the need to explain myself or earn love from those who saw me as disposable, because I had found a well of strength within I never knew existed. Every wave that crashed on the shore whispered that I was enough, and I began to believe it with every breath of salty air. I spent my days exploring the town's quiet streets, greeting strangers who smiled back without judgment or hidden agendas. Each step I took alone felt like a declaration of freedom, a testament to the resilience that had carried me through the darkest days of my life. At night, I fell asleep to the gentle lullaby of the sea, comforted by the knowledge that I no longer needed anyone's permission to find joy. The solitude that once terrified me had become my sanctuary, a place where I could finally rest and heal. Sitting by the ocean one evening, I realized that peace wasn't something given by others but something we must claim for ourselves. The memories of what I'd lost no longer felt like wounds but like lessons etched into the fabric of who I was becoming. I understood that letting go of those who hurt me wasn't a failure but an act of love for myself, a commitment to never again accept less than the respect I deserved. The crashing waves reminded me that even the strongest storms pass, and new tides always come to wash away the pain. I watched the sun dip below the horizon, the sky awash in colors that felt like a promise of brighter days ahead. The bitterness that once burned in my chest had softened into gratitude for the strength I had gained through the trials I faced. I knew that life would continue to bring challenges, but I finally trusted myself to weather them with grace. In that quiet moment, I embraced the person I had become, wiser, stronger, and unafraid of standing alone. As I prepared to leave the resort and return home, I knew my family's lives had been forever changed by the lesson they had forced me to teach. They would remember the day their cruelty boomeranged back, leaving them exposed and alone while I rose from the ashes of their betrayal. My silence, patience, and strength had spoken louder than any angry words ever could, proving that love without respect is nothing more than a hollow illusion. I had shown them I was not the fragile woman they thought they could discard, but a force to be reckoned with. On my last evening, I stood barefoot on the sand, watching the moonlight shimmer across the water and felt an unshakable peace settle in my soul. I knew they would carry the sting of this reckoning for years, a reminder that those who sow cruelty will one day reap its bitter harvest. I promised myself I would never again beg for love from anyone unwilling to offer it freely. And with that vow, I stepped into the future with my head high, ready to live the life I deserved on my own terms.